Hello, everybody, and particularly welcome to those of you on Zoom. We've got an audience from all over New Zealand, most of Australia, south, east, west, up to Indonesia, into Borneo, and then back across the Pacific, back into Fiji. So we've got quite a crowd here this afternoon. What I need to check with Kath is whether you can hear me. Yes? Well, that's a relief. Apparently you can hear me. So most of you will know me, but my name is Christian and I'm the leader of the GeoMaster team at Integral. And I thought it'd be nice for those of you watching from a distance to at least see who we've got in the room here. Do you want to wave that around, Luke? Funny that, I will do that. You can all wave. So earlier today, this group that you just saw, we've been having an ArcGIS Pro introductory course provided by Eagle. They are the Esri distributors here in New Zealand and in the Pacific region. If you have any questions, those of you on Zoom, feel free to send through on the Q&A section on the Zoom. And we have Kath here from the Integral team who will be monitoring that and will pass them on to whoever's speaking at the time. So let's have a look at the agenda for this our afternoon. So the plan for the session will start off with a bit of an update on what's happening in the Integral company. There's growth happening there. Sorry? You share that screen with the Zoom people? Ah, good question. Thank you, Luke. That was my intention. I am now. Thank you. I'm one of those technologically challenged people, you understand. So, company update. The bulk of the afternoon will be looking at GeoMaster working in the ArcGIS Pro environment. Then Luke will be leading a session on ArcGIS Online and Portal, and quite a good demonstration in that space. We'll have a bit of a discussion on options for cloud and hosting GeoMaster related data in the cloud. Then a section on what's new in GeoMaster, normally what occupies most of these meetings, but at the moment it's a rather small section because most of what's happened is in Pro. Similar with Harvest Manager. Then Luke will give us an update with what's happening with GeoMaster Mobile, and finally we'll open the floor up for discussion and questions and etc. But before we get into the meat of the meeting, let's divert briefly. And not that one just yet. Well, it's been 25 years actually, and we think that's a milestone worth making a little bit of fuss about. About this time, 25 years ago, 1997, in a meeting like this, we presented our concept of what GeoMaster could look like, or TFM2 as it was called at the time, which stood for the Forest Master. It was called TFM2 because it replaced the original TFM, which was a DOS application. And digging through my archives, we talked this morning about floppy disks. I found an original DOS installation, copyright 1987, for TFM. I was not involved in its development, but I was on the testing team and I was not popular with the developer. I found lots of holes. Like most DOS data applications, the years in those days were recorded in 2 digits, 97, 98, 99, and then, oh crap, what do we do now? That was the software world. And that gave rise to this global paranoia called Y2K, when computer systems around the world were expected to implode, and the fear was that government, finance, and hospital systems would all crash and burn. I even found this Y2K incident management document that was sent to us by the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, to whom we were then employed. 7 weeks to the new year. Time is marching on. 7 weeks to the critical Y2K date of 1 January 2000. Lots of work has been done and continues to be done across the ministry to prevent Y2K problems and prepare for dealing with any Y2K related incidents. We are now at the stage of ensuring that all Y2K incident information is appropriately managed. How governmental. The purpose of this newsletter is to provide you with details of Y2K incident management documentation that you will receive. And if you don't, please contact your Y2K business or site coordinator, and a summary of Y2K incident management processes. Everything you need to know was on this piece of paper for those of us who are panicking or not, as the case happened to be. Anyway, that was the reason why GeoMaster was born, because TFM was not going to get over the Y2K boundary. We need to build a new system. And at the time, Windows was new. And so that was going to be our new development environment. So a couple of years later, we released our first official version of TFM2, version 1.03 in 1999. So just before the deadline, we had a version of TFM ready to go that was Y2K compliant. Then in 2000, just a year later, we integrated TFM with ArcView and MapInfo, which were the GIS products of the time. And at that point, we renamed ForestMaster to GeoMaster to reflect that the spatial dimension that was now on the system. Since then, we've hosted nearly 50 user meetings. We're up to version 1.37, and if you take maintenance releases into account, we've had over 50 releases of GeoMaster over those 25 years. Normally, we try to keep our updates small and incremental, so there isn't a lot of new stuff for you as users to have to come to grips with. However, with Pro, it's probably the biggest step change we've ever had since that initial release in terms of a change of development. But the encouraging thing is, most of you already know how to use it. We just need to show you where the buttons have moved. So there's not much to be learned from your perspective, although there was an awful lot from us. So all the GIS code in GeoMaster has had to be rewritten. It's in a different language. And given how much there is and how new it all is, there will be a few wobbles. That's inevitable, that's software. But I've been very impressed with how quickly Connor has picked up the wobbles that we pointed out to him. Connor, as a new developer, I'll introduce him shortly. And he's got a really quick turnaround. So we're not worried about this. It's just how life is. The core GeoMaster is, as it always has been, that hasn't changed. It's just the GIS interface that's been updated. So basically the fundamentals of GeoMaster are stable and as they've always have been. It's just with the GIS we're having to come to grips. Excuse me, the one thing we've had to change with GeoMaster is it was a 32-bit application, is now 64-bit. And we've discovered that 64-bit doesn't behave quite the same, and memory's managed a bit differently. And so we're still finding a few cracks, even in the basic GeoMaster running 64-bit. We've had to change some of the components, and some other bits are different. So once again, a few wobbles. Bear with us, let us know, and we'll deal with them as they come. So this time, last year, the user meeting was hosted as a webinar because New Zealand had just moved into traffic lights. And are we seeing it now? Yeah. Cool. And those of us in the northern half of New Zealand, we were all assigned the red light, which meant we were wearing face masks, limited numbers, vaccine certificates, contact tracing, blah, blah, blah. Interestingly, at around that time, about 90% of the population of New Zealand was vaccinated, and New Zealand was recording about 100 new cases a day. So here we are, a year later, and we're reporting at least 5,000 new cases a day and expected to get to 10,000 very soon. And there are no restrictions, such as life. Interestingly, it was a lot more severe earlier in the year. So this is the past year that we're looking at here. At the beginning was a year ago when we had our 100 cases per day. Around about March is when they released or let go of all the constraints and they let flights back into the country, and it suddenly shot up to about 20,000 cases a day, almost straight away. As you can see, things improved for a while until winter. We had another little blip. It settled down, and now we're back into this growth curve, and who knows where that's taking us. But that's where we are at the moment. Anyway, as a result of all of that, I've been doing much less travel than usual. The week before last was my first trip to Australia in about 3 years. First stop was Melbourne, and that was for Forest Tech. And then we had our first GeoMaster User Meeting for the year there as well. What struck me about, let's have a look. Yep, like I said, back on the road. Struck me about Melbourne as architecture. I'd forgotten about all the buildings they have over there, having not been there in a while. So that was just around the corner from where I was staying. That's interesting. Right. I'll just stop. Do the stop share thing and share again. Can we see pretty buildings? Right, welcome to Melbourne. That was just around the corner from my hotel. We had this rather interesting building that seemed to be marching across the landscape. And lots of curved buildings around. These are all curved faces here, which I thought was an interesting challenge for architects and builders. Anyway, after the user meeting, I went down to Launceston, which is in Tasmania, and we had another user meeting because there's quite a large group of GeoMaster users down there. And whenever I go down to Launceston, I always go up the Cataract Valley. I don't know how many of you have been there, the gorge, but it's quite a large, long walk, and it's very impressive, lots of rock formations. This is nothing spectacular about this shot other than it shows you we've had quite a lot of rain lately. And what I thought was interesting was downstream from the rocks, all the froth had sort of formed this marbling pattern on the water. Which I found quite intriguing. Anyway, most of my trips I tried to organize a bit of wilderness adventure. I've got to travel that far, I might as well set up something interesting. So I went to Ben Lomond National Park. Ben Lomond, which is quite close to Launceston. Getting up into the mountain is quite interesting, as you can see here, but at least it was by vehicle in this case. And I very soon got to meet some of the locals. And the most dominant plant in this area is dragon heath, which is this thing here, which is quite interesting. It's attractive, and you don't want to get too close to it because it's very sharp. But when it flowers, it does make itself quite spectacular. And interesting, when it dies, it makes quite a creepy formation. There's a lot of these dead bushes around as well. Now, the week before I went to Australia, we had our end of year integral function down in Napier. And we had a creative contribution to that, where we had a Van Gogh forgery competition. So, so here's the Atlas, the integral team, easels and paintbrushes in hand, also liberally supplied with alcohol and chips to keep us going. And we're having a lot of fun. We've all given this little sample picture, a Van Gogh style, but with a Christmas theme, and that was our project for the afternoon. So here's Luke having a fine dab at Christmas Van Gogh style. And just to finish off with, there's the team effort. So that was a nice way to celebrate the end of year within the Integral team. So that's the Integral team and partners having a fun time. So back to the meat. So a few changes, not a lot, but many of you over the years may have met Andrew Taylor. He's our CEO. He's recently built a house in Gulf Harbour, which is about 3/4 of an hour north of Auckland, and he's shifting there next week. So remote control has taken over a whole new meaning, and we'll probably see him from time to time. But thankfully, Andrew's arranged that Kath will come and join has joined our team. She's been with us about a year and a half. And Kath is the local manager for the Rotorua region, and she takes care of anything that matters other than software. And it's been a real delight, I have to say. One of the things Kath would like to do is to get in touch with many of you as the leaders of Atlas products in your companies, and just do a bit of a survey in terms of what are you using, how does it work, how does it not work, where would you like to see us go? So that's sort of a survey, something Kath would like to do. So if that's all right with you, I'm just giving you a head warning, that's what she intends to do. Some of you will have met Luke over the years at various meetings. Luke has been leading the charge on the GeoMaster development for ArcGIS Pro. And it's been a big step, but it's been a very fruitful year with Luke leading that on. And to help him, we've brought along Connor. Connor is a recent graduate, and he joined the team about 8 or 9 months ago, and he's done a lot of the programming behind the Arc Pro conversion, and he's made a huge difference. So it's been a real delight to have him on the team. We still have John, of course. John does the stuff that isn't GeoMaster, so Yield Table Manager and FOLP and Forecast and all those other tools that we sort of loosely link with. He's the other leg in the team. And the plans are that we're going to get in the new year, hopefully another programmer to join, because there's just a lot of work to be done. We're also quite keen to get, in due course, a business analyst to do the people stuff and the integration between the software and users. So those are the plans for the company in the coming year or so. So with all that background behind us, let's have a look at GeoMaster for ArcGIS Pro. This is just a sort of a bullet summary of the features, just to know what's coming up, and I'll demonstrate some of this. And then Luke will come along shortly and do another demonstration, in that case, showing it on ArcGIS Online. So just whipping through this quickly, creating patches, stands and events, which is typically something you're always going to be doing from GIS. Some of those events require integration with the GIS in terms of changing symbology, so the likes of planting, clearfell, disestablishment, and then being able to undo all of those steps. Patch splitting and merging, obviously very strong GIS functions, and again, undoing those. GIS managed events, so this all had to be rewritten in .NET, so we've got a new wizard, but it behaves much the same as the old one. Viewing data, so the patch class, viewing stands, viewing attributes. The mapping tool, the GIS mapper, and creating prescriptions. Assessment planner. Reworking plots, deleting assessments, that's all in there. And then I'll hand over to Connor at the end to do a bit of a demonstration of the configuration, which is probably the single largest component of the ArcGIS link to GeoMaster, which is something he's worked on quite solidly. And also just something a bit lighter, the sketch tool, which also has been replaced. So let's go live and look at some of these. Just wait for ArcGIS Pro to warm up. Turn the crank. see what we get out of it. So this morning with Arc Pro, we were updated in the way of using the ribbons, which has come out of Microsoft some years ago, and how all the Arc tools are made available through the ribbons. And so what we have done is we've added a new tab, a GeoMaster tab, which provides the tools to GeoMaster the same way that the toolbar does as ArcMap. I'll just pull GeoMaster over here where you can see it. So GeoMaster is pretty much as we know it, unchanged. And so that was the tool to connect as before. We've got a little show button here that pulls GeoMaster to the front if you can't see it. I'll let Connor do the config. Now within Arc Pro, there's a whole section on selecting, but because that is something that we do so commonly in GeoMaster, we've also got a selections group within the GeoMaster ribbon as well, which just gives you shortcut access to the same tools. So I can go select in the GIS, you'll see it's in GeoMaster, select in GeoMaster, zooms to GIS. So that's all, again, as we're familiar. The refresh buttons are there, so if you want to update, if the selections have got out of sync, you can either say I want to update the GIS as it is in GeoMaster, or vice versa, GeoMaster from GIS. The query tool, show events. Okay, so we just click on patch. The event list will finally come up on the other form. There we go. So we've got a thinning underway. So let's have a look at that event and create the map. And so this is the new, the mapper interface coming through, which is creating a new layout in ArcGIS Pro speak. But it'll look very familiar to those of you creating maps out of GeoMaster, ArcMap. And once again, we have the ability to set an emergency location. So that's now on this little toolbar here. Click on that and say, well, actually, I want to have that as my emergency coordinates, which will have been updated on the map. And as before, we can create the prescription from this. So that should all look, again, familiar for those of you using that feature of GeoMaster. Create new events. As before, we'll select an area, and then we have all our GeoMaster events sitting there ready to go. Luke will do some more examples of this later on, including the GIS managed event. I had something selected. Expect to see fertilizer event come up here somewhere. Not today. Anyway, as I showed you before, the GIS managed events are supported. Compare areas, same as before. In this case, we'll do a load to memory. Because this is my testing database, it's full of all sorts of anomalies that we hope you don't have in production. Update patch areas, recreate stands, those are features that you'll be familiar with, creating a new assessment. So let's turn on the assessment layers. So somewhere there hasn't been one. Select the stand. New assessment. So again, it's a newly built, but it'll look very familiar. Copy that to the strata layer. And we've got one plot per hectare, 0.06 hectares, 21 plots required. Create a new layout. And there it is there. Save that to GeoMaster. Give it a date. We'll do it today. And as before, it's going to pull up the GIS mapper and present that to us. At least that's the plan. There we go. And that can again be exported to a PDF. Which will now be a GIS georeference PDF file. And then within there, we also have adding and removing plots, selecting plots within polygons, exporting to file, which I've just done, deleting assessments. All the tools that were in ArcMap are now here available under that menu there. There are, of course, different ways of looking at viewing patches. Connor's going to look at that in a bit more detail later on. But then along with the patch class, we've got looking at stands. Edit mode, I don't know how many people use that, but the idea was if you have a photograph, you just move the lines and there's not so much clutter. And of course, we can do our view by attribute. So, look at that. Things are slower than they are in ArcMap. That's what we just have to get used to. And in some cases, a lot slower, but Luke will speak to that shortly. Most of the presentation stuff works pretty well in Pro and in Online. So we'll just turn that one off. You go back to page class. You want to create a stand map. Again, you select the tool, click on the stand. Much the same as we saw before for operations. And similarly with compartments. So the reports are there, patch report, stand report. The difference is previously you selected the tool and then clicked. I think now it's the other way around. You select the stand and then select the report. But that means you can also add to your selection if you wanted to. So there are our usual stand reports in there. We've our selection toolbar that we had again in ArcMap, and everything's coming onto the other screen, of course. So similar concept as before, we've selected some patches, could have been on the basis of anything, whether it's species or owner or sliver size or whatever you want. Register the selection, go to the first patch. We no longer need to maintain that it's a selected set because this has remembered that list. So there's the first one that we selected. Second one, etc. If you can't remember where it is, there's the flash and the option to select it again. And for those who lost your way, we have the find tool, so we can look for a stand. Flash it. If we select it, it's going to go to the current selection, which was where it was before, so that was unhelpful. Clear the selection first, and then select that again, and that's where we were. So once again, this is just repeating everything that was there before. Nothing new. There's not much that is new. There are a few things, but primarily it's just replacing what we had. Luke will talk about the export, that's for GeoMaster Mobile, and then within the utilities, that menu is still there. Stand labels, updating patch locations into GeoMaster, update patch records, risk module is in there, updating risk layers, carbon accounting areas, changing patch class, explode multipart, rebuild boundaries. So all of those will be familiar functions for most of you. I imagine that you can, because this is just following. The question was, can we customize the toolbar? And this is sitting within an Arc environment. So I'm guessing that those toolbars are customizable. Thank you. Can I have my ribbon back? The answer is probably, but we haven't tried it. So often you want it sitting right on the top. Fair comment. I'll just make a note and we'll go and check that out. Thanks, Wendy. Good question. I've pretty much got to the end of just showing you through the basic toolbar, and Luke and Connor are going to pick up some more detail. So having got through all this, any other questions after Wendy's start? Anything you're not seeing that you rather wish you had by now? Sorry, so Harvest Manager. Ah, that's a very good question. You can see we've got the tab, but that's all we've got. So basically, this year's project was GeoMaster, getting that out of the up and running, and we've pretty much got all that nailed off. So next year's project is Harvest Area Designer and all the harvest interactions. So if you're using Harvest Manager, if that's a big part of what you do, I'm afraid you're stuck with ArcMap for at least another 6 months or so, at least, if not longer, until we've got that one finished. So we've done nothing other than a bit of the configuration in terms of Harvest Manager. Stu, you had a question.
Oh, just in the ArcMap version we installed, you got a handy readout of the area jurisdiction.
Right.
Will we see the same in Pro?
How do we turn that on again, Connor? There's a little button for that.
Yeah.
Is it down here somewhere? This one here. Patch mode, 0 hectares selected and 0 polygons because it's lying. Let's try this. Now we've got 25 hectares selected and 1 polygon. So yes, we've added it in. It doesn't come with Pro. And Connor had to scrape around to find a way to get a window in there to do that, but it's been done. He's also added a feature that tells you which layers that they're in or how many layers. So you've got 3 polygons and 2 layers, whereas previously we just gave you the total count. So it's actually been enhanced. I'm glad you like that. We use it a lot. Any other questions? Okay, do we have any on the Q&As? Not at this stage? Okay, they can keep coming, and we'll have more question opportunities shortly. So that's pretty much me.
One more, sorry. Here is the toolbar.
The editor toolbar is an ArcMap feature which becomes comes with Arc Pro. So that's not really something that we would have there. Editing tab. That just comes with Pro out of the box. Let's see if I can pull it up. Just waiting for Pro because I enthusiastically turned it off. So basically we're talking about, I'm presuming, this ribbon here, which is the edit ribbon within Arc Pro, which enables you to create features, modify, snap, move, split, which is a key one for GeoMaster, and adjusting, reshaping are probably the two key spatial edits you'll be doing in GeoMaster. So that's in this edit ribbon here. So there's one other tool that we had was split by feature, but we don't need that. Was there anything else that was added? Which is this one down here.
Now being added version 3, natively the native Pro split tool.
If you couldn't hear us over the Zoom link, what Luke was just explaining is that we have built in the split by feature because that was there in the ArcMap environment, but with Arc Pro 3, that feature came as out of the box as part of Arc Pro, so we no longer need to support that feature. Okay. So, O'Connor, you're going to come up and do configurations, which means what I've just done was not necessary. Oh, well, something to step right so out of your way. Yep.
So I'm Connor, I'm a new developer. I will be taking you through the configuration and also the area sketch tool, which used to be called ad hoc polygons. So just show. So when you go into configuration now, it looks pretty much the exact same, but it's just prettier. So you can still do everything that you used to be able to do. You can set up your patch class, your archives, your assessments. As a reminder for people, you right click to add new ones if you need new ones. Example of thinning. You can just add the new tab and configure it how you like. It's the same for risk. So for stand labels, we had to change it over to supporting Arcade. So if you use a VB script stand label, I wouldn't recommend you configure it through our stuff because it'll expect something different and probably not work very well. A new feature in Arc Pro is you can choose which sort of a color ramp you want to use for view by stand, color compartments, and view by attributes as well. And that gets saved into the registry, so it's user specific. Something that I began to add in for Stu before he left for Eagle was the ability to configure your styles. So you can choose whether to use our new styles that we've created for Arc Pro, or if you're too used to Arc Map styles, you can change back. And you can use a custom amount of any of them. Quickly switch between them. So I've just switched back to the old styles, and you'll see it's become these pretty little dots. The styles are saved into the config table, so they would be organization-wide rather than user-specific. And other than that, everything else works the exact same configuration. So the next up is the area sketch tool. And that's basically just an easy way to digitize a polygon and figure out how big the area is. How much of it is stocked, unstocked, non-productive, what stands are, and how much area is in those stands. You can remove the most recent polygon in case you do multiple at once. And you can also export this to CSV. You can do multiple polygons by holding down Shift and digitizing. And then once you're done, adds them all up. And you can remove whatever one you did last. And that's pretty much me. So on to Luke.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm about to do a live demo to my machine back in the office. So let's see if we can connect. Right. Sorry about the delay. What you can see here is ArcGIS Pro connected to layers sourced from ArcGIS Online. So these are coming from the States, I believe. And GeoMaster is connecting to a database in an Azure data center in Sydney. So there is no local, so GeoMaster DB at database.windows.net, that's an Azure database. So what you can see here is GeoMaster with no local data, and it's running purely to an Azure database and ArcGIS Online. So no servers that we have that are involved, other people's. So I'll just run through what we can do, which is pretty much everything, with GeoMaster running in this configuration with online layers. So I'm going to merge, where are we? I've moved everything on the ribbon and everything's changed. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've just updated the ribbon like 2 days ago and I'm still finding my way. So I'll merge some land bank patches. Whoops. What was that, Christian? Oh, thank you. Well, it is a date. And because this is talking to ArcGIS Online, edits tend to be slower than a local connection. And I think we can speed this up. I'm stacking up edits where I shouldn't. So we'll hopefully have this a bit faster when we release. But there's the merged patches, and I'm going to create a stand from land bank. And I've copied the date up again. 1, 2. And there we are, we have our stand. I'm going to then plant that stand. I was going to do the assessment planner, but Christian's been there. That all just works. That's per normal. Oh, actually, I will create an assessment. I'll show some of the new assessment planner tool. Well, they're old, but the new to assessment planner tools. And saving to ArcGIS Online, edits are slower, so a bit of patience is required. Or a lot of patience is required. The reason I'm showing you ArcGIS Online like this is we have a lot of smaller companies that are geographically distributed, and this could be a way that they could use this, because currently a lot of them share their GeoMaster database via VPN or something like that, but they haven't found a good way of sharing their spatial data, and they're using SharePoint. And I don't really agree with sharing file geodatabases on SharePoint with multi-user access. So this could be an option to the smaller players out there. So just per ordinary GeoMaster, all that just works. We have added the ability to add and remove plots. And some patience is required here at times. Go. Oh. And if we make something selectable, that looks better. There's our plot. We can delete plots and move plots. And if you've decided you shouldn't have put that assessment there in the first place, you can delete them as well. All right. Not exactly a normal thing to do, but assume 25 plus years have gone past and we're now going to clear file the stand. And I know what I did wrong. Finish the event. Ah. Right, try again. Okay. Love live demos. Oh yeah. Well, it took longer than it normally does, but there you go. We're back to land bank and you can undo your events like that. And I'm going to delete the merge event. So all the things you can do in GeoMaster, you can do on web layers. What was that, Christian?
Eventually.
Eventually, yes. Right, well, that's a worst case high latency GIS and a reasonable high latency GeoMaster. And as you can see, it's quite usable. And next, I'm going to show you working with ArcGIS Portal. So I have a map here
Want to give a bit of an outline as to the difference between Portal and Online?
Okay, yep. ArcGIS Online is Esri's cloud web offering. I imagine a lot of you actually use it in your day job. Hands up those that use online. And I'm seeing maybe about 50% of the audience raise their hands. Portal is the self-hosted version of ArcGIS Online. So it's something you host within your own data center. Your IT looks after it. You keep your data in your own enterprise. And you can also throw a lot of hardware at it if you want performance, where you're limited to what Esri gives you speed-wise. And I believe Esri only have 2 data centers. Anyone from Eagle care to comment?
It's more for the US, for Australia, and then it's the Pacific.
Oh, there's one in Australia.
I think it's Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's,
Pacific is in Australia, it's quite a-
okay. Oh, well, there's an Asia Pacific data center. I didn't know about that one. So, yeah. So if you want faster performance, host your own because there's less latency. So that's the reason you do Portal, and you keep your data to yourself. And if that's important.
Have it available with web layers rather than direct database.
Yeah, and with Portal, you can use web layers, but you can also do direct database connects to your enterprise geodatabase as well, which if you're in the same data center or close to it, you're less latency and that's faster. But if you're within, say, the same country, your web layers are likely to be more performant because it's a less chatty protocol and works better for that. Anyway, so we have here some layers that are sourced from my enterprise geodatabase, and I'm just going to share that to
So the process you're going through is to take an enterprise data set,
Yep.
put it on Portal, and then view it through our web layers.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't get that.
So well, what is the process going to take?
Oh, what I'm going to do is check that I'm connected to the right thing first. There we go. Oh yeah, we're connected to Portal here. I'm going to go share web layer. Training. I'm going to make sure I'm. Oh, actually, I've missed a step here. Make sure on your map that the assignment of unique IDs for sharing web layers is enabled. It's going to complain about this anyway, but do make sure that's on. What's that? Oh, yes. Thank you, Christian. And also for GeoMaster, make sure you have included your config table as a standalone table. Right. Actually, probably not necessary for Portal, but definitely required for ArcGIS Online. We need to push the config table up there. Whoops, train. Make sure you are sharing features. If I was pushing to ArcGIS Online, I would click on copy data, but I'm not because we want it hosted in our enterprise geodatabase. We leave it there. Specify where you want it. Set who to share with, in my case, the whole ArcGIS enterprise. Analyze. It will analyze anyway if you did click publish, but check that you don't have anything major. It's complaining that a couple of layers are not versioned. That's actually our config table, so ignore that because that's fine. The data Z aware of my contour layer. I haven't configured the default heights, that's fine. and it's also warning us some symbology will be downgraded. The default GeoMaster symbology is not compatible with online, and they will downgrade it. Just be aware that will happen. You're going to have to choose some symbology that is compatible with ArcGIS Online. The issue is when you have multi-layer symbology, so a thing with an outline and some slashes is another layer within your symbol, that's not compatible. So just be aware that's the case. But I'm going to wear that at the moment, not fix our symbology, and just go publish. Doesn't take too long to publish stuff, but it takes a little while. Right, okay, and we're done. I'm going to just create a new project. And go to Portal. And there is the map I've just published, and you can just grab your patch layer, copy it across. There we go. And one thing we have had to do is layers are named differently from web layers. So, oh, come on, so programming wise, it's not called patch, it's called L13 patch, because that happens to be the 13th item in the web map. So we've updated config. So web layers look for certain records in the config table, and if you've got a direct enterprise connection, it looks for the ordinary ones, so they can cohabitate. We can have direct enterprise geodatabase connections or web layer connections, and they'll just work. All you have to do is, once you've published this, is come in here and configure it. I've already published this a heap of times, and so it's already correctly configured, but there it is there. So we connected? No. And so there you are. Just check. I'll show something like splitting by treated. Progress. So the person that was asking where the editor toolbar is, again, there are no toolbars in ArcGIS Pro. There's the edit tab in the ribbon. So create, work in progress. Save, works the same as desktop, just different, well, looks a bit different, that's all. I'm going to then create an event. And then we'll see, this has already been well thinned, but then we can select our polygon and I will split treat it. Yeah. And that didn't work. Okay. You see what I did wrong, Christian? Okay. Well, what's that? Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, we'll have that fixed by the time you get your hands on it. That's pretty much it for my demo. Oh, okay, go, shoot.
With some published as a vector layer instead of a net layer.
Vector tiles and sorry. Oh, sorry, I've had a question. Is there a performance improvement if you publish as a vector tile layer? Yeah, vector tiles themselves are not editable. Am I correct there?
Vector is feature services.
Yep.
Vector tiles is a halfway house between a tiled layer and vector layer, but it is base map.
Yeah.
You can't actually edit that
Yep.
data.
Yep.
That should be using features.
Yep, that was
Services or vector data. It is vector.
Yep, that was my understanding as well. We've got representatives of Eagle in the audience here, and Macaulay, is that how I pronounce it? Malachy was saying that vector tiles are a halfway house between.
It's base map.
Yeah, it's a base map and not directly editable itself. So if you use the vector tile, you can use it for viewing and it'd be really fast, but you can't edit it. So I hope that answers your question.
I think this question did get answered. What is the advantage of Pro over Online? Is it processing speed?
Okay, using it. I think the question is, what's the benefits of using ArcGIS Pro with geodatabase connections as opposed to using online? Is that, yeah. ArcGIS Online, I'm going to include Portal in the answer, is a web technology. It is not a chatty protocol. So if you've got high latency, if you're distributed over a large geographic area, say a country or a state, if you're in Australia or somewhere like that, you're likely to have better performance with using web layers. But if you are just within a single city or something like that, or just within a single building, direct geodatabase connections are likely to be way faster because they're chattier. But if you're on a LAN, that's going to work better. So the benefit is if you're distributed, you're likely. But I was talking to one of the architects at Eagle on this the other week. Do test before you, go to something like that, because it depends, was his thing, on all of your infrastructure, distances, latencies, and all of that. So test it out, but you may get performance increases from web layers.
They've got a big thanks. And if you're out of interest, if your patch layer is an ArcGIS Online as a feature service, what projection is it in?
It can be whatever projection you want it to be in.
So you might need to just repeat.
Oh, the question, sorry. The question was, if we publish the patch layer to ArcGIS Online, what projection it will be in? It will be in the projection that you publish it in. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
The representation is it will publish that.
Yeah. So if you're in New Zealand, it's New Zealand Transverse Mercator. If you're in Australia, it's one of your various GDA projections or whatever. Yeah. Any, oh, yes.
It's done from.
Yes.
My first question is that, we still use the loose couple in GIS and database. So can somehow enable GMDB as database? This question.
Lan, your accent's just enough that I didn't follow that question.
So let's say we can enable the GMDB as database. Sorry, second question.
Spatial database.
So you're wanting to put GeoMaster into spatially enable the GeoMaster database. If you could keep, I would say technically maybe, we've never tried. What Lan from, where are you working, Lan? Timberlands, okay, you've moved. Lan is asking, can we put GeoMaster in a spatial database? The answer is possibly. We've never tried. You could have spatially enabled layers and keep the tables.
Our intention is to spatially enable some features like
Yeah.
GeoMaster Bits,
Yeah.
polygon,
Yep.
or area changes.
Yep. And if you didn't hear Christian there, Christian was saying we're thinking of spatially enabling certain things such as GIS managed events, and even I'm thinking historical patch shapes in the GeoMaster database. I wouldn't recommend you try that really. It's something that we've not tested. But if it's really, really important to you, come and talk to us.
The second question is, when you talk about the publishing the patch layer into the portal,
Yes.
enterprise portal, can we share this as a reference layer so that the user can edit it back to the geo database from then edit it and serve in the hosted geo database? So can we, when you publish it, you publish it as the feature hosted?
Yeah.
Feature service. So can we just publish it as a reference?
Oh yes, definitely. I checked on the feature to publish it as a feature service. You do not have to do that. You could just have it as a web layer, and that's just visible. Can you just vector tile it without having a feature service on, Macaulay?
Well, the tick box you do when you publish the data, if you tick the box, say,
Don't.
you can either reference the layer, in which case it's still referring back to your
Yep.
enterprise database.
Yep.
Or if you do tick the box, it's going to publish a copy to your data store in the portal.
Yep.
So if that's optional, it's just a tick box when you publish.
Yep.
Again, vector tiles is only used when you want to have a base map.
Yep.
It's kind of not relevant to the conversation, I think, for what you're doing.
Yep.
It's just meant to be for like a base map layer
Yep.
rather than an active layer in your GeoMaster.
Does that answer your question, Lan?
Yes.
Okay. Any more? Yep.
Is there an opportunity to see what GeoMaster was, the events that you just did, looks like in the browser?
In the
browser?
No, it's purely we'd be updating the features in there, but it's not. We haven't done a web version of GeoMaster yet, Dave. So no, there is not at the moment.
That's a big one.
That's a big one, but we do intend to release somewhere in the future a web GeoMaster, just not yet. Yep.
On a portal setup that you're showing us, that GeoMaster database, also GeoMaster database, it is still sitting in that sort of external server.
Yeah, it was actually. I forgot to switch over. Yes. Normally you wouldn't be doing that if you're running Portal. You'd be connecting to a local database server. I just neglected to switch it back. Any more? Just as something I have been working on, it will be not quite finished yet, but this is for GeoMaster Mobile. Currently for desktop, for managing mobile stuff, we have a separate add-in. This is just part of GeoMaster's add-in now in Pro. So here's the export tool. And it failed because, okay. Failed because it's trying to connect to ArcGIS. Sorry, it's trying to talk to the Azure database, which I haven't coded up to talk to yet. So, but that's a work in progress. But our mobile tools will be available. If you're the administrator, this will be on your ribbon. If you're not the administrator, you will not get bugged with this. But we will have down the bottom here the ability for all users to import notes from your mobile. So, any more questions? Cool.
So, the spatial discussion about cloud, you largely covered it.
Yep. Oh, your slides, yes.
And just while Luke dialing up the cloud discussion, one of the advantages of using feature services with Assessment Planner means you can design a plot layout for an experiment and then be out in the field and have field maps, pull in that layer, connect survey 1 to 3. So you can use Assessment Planner for any number of different types of assessments, not just the ones that are linked to GeoMaster. It becomes a broader field research tool that you can use because of having the web services there.
Yeah, just looking at the slide here, I noted in testing that bulk updates to Portal were not successful. That's when I did an update patch records for an entire estate. That didn't go well, probably because it wasn't programmed with such a huge update in mind. So if you're using Portal, either do a direct geodatabase connection if you're updating your entire state, or do forest at a time or something like that. And as Christian was saying, Assessment Planner, we can feed field maps and ultimately use that as a starting point for survey 1, 2, 3. A lot of people are using survey 1, 2, 3 out in the field, things like Silver QC. We are giving serious consideration to writing a way of importing survey 1, 2, 3 into Silver QC. Let us know if this is something that interests you or not. Some other things on the slide. Portal in New Zealand, you'd want to have an ELA license or an expensive ArcGIS enterprise license. Yeah, I think that's pretty much covered the rest. So I think that's me, Christian. Demo, done that. Yeah, I think we're back to Christian.
So, despite everything that's happened in the pro world, there has still been some ongoing development in the GeoMaster product itself. So Luke's going to have to get me out of the server.
Matthew's asking, what's the export functionality? Is there a...
Yes. So the question was, does Assessment Planner export to GPX? And yes, that is available in the pro version of Assessment Planner. It's a good question. Are you still, is this still your machine, Luke, or is this my machine? Okay, fine. So just firing up GeoMaster again, just look at some new things here. So one of the requests we had some years ago, it's taken a while, but when you're doing assessments in GeoMaster up to now, you've only been able to record numerical attributes. And for people who are doing some surveys, they want to have qualitative attributes. They want to be able to have a textual, good, bad, medium, poor, or other sorts of values other than numeric. So we've enabled that. Let's just sort of randomly see if we can find an assessment somewhere. So here's a regular assessment form that we're familiar with. And now there's, if we go to the assessment tab, we see the numerical data. Now this is a QC for planting, so all we've got is stocking, but there's a new tab down here for text fields. All right, so in here, was this audited by who? A, B, C. What was the weed infestation? This could be a pick list, low, for example. And so now when we're looking at the reports that relate to that assessment, we're going to see that those textual attributes come through just as the numeric ones have done in the past. So setting it up is basically using edit lookups. So we have, along with the assessment attributes, we also now have assessment textual attributes. So those are the fields that we saw earlier that came through in the pick list. And we can assign those to particular event types. So let's say for planting, can't see at the moment, it's alphabetic, that's why. QC, we've got weed assessment and was it audited for argument's sake. So they will come up by default for planting assessments. What you don't have with numeric attributes is you don't have a pick list because it's going to be a number, whereas the textual ones you have the option of a pick list. So along with the assessment textual attributes, we have assessment textual attribute lookups. And you pick up the attribute you're interested in. So for weed infestation, low, medium, high, or none detected. For others, we won't have any. So the audited is just who was the auditor. So it's just a text entry field. So the idea is not that this becomes a paragraph. This is still a pretty, I think it's about 50 character string or something like that. So it is for short string text that you want to record against the assessment that you can add along with the numerics that are there already. Another small feature, let's say we've got some events, show all of selected. And let's just sort those. So I'm interested in site prep events. I want to do some work on those. I can now save those to a CSV file. And so we can now have a textual output of an event list or a selection within an event list, if that's useful for you. It also has the additional value. Let me just refresh this. I can now select events, so I can go back to that file. It sees that I've got a job number column, so I can select those events. It'll take me back, open that up as an event list, and then you can continue to do what you want with that, whether it's create maps or edit them or whatever else. So there's added support there for batch processing events if that's what you wish to do. Historically, most of our companies had a handful of forests, and if you had the word Kang, you knew exactly that it was Kaingaroa forest and such like. It was pretty obvious with the forest codes with a handful. But with the likes of companies that have many forests, and certainly when Olsen's came on board, we discovered that have hundreds and hundreds of forests. Those codes really don't cut it anymore. They become quite ambiguous. So we've added the ability to have forest names recorded in all the GIS layers. So wherever you can record a forest code, you can also record a forest name. And that'll appear in the configuration that Connor showed you. So where it's got forest code, you've also got a forest name option. So if you've got a field for forest name, it'll automatically populate the forest name as well as the forest code. And hopefully that will make your maps a little more meaningful to people who have lots of forests to deal with. Assessment planner, a few tweaks. You can turn off the plot layer. I'm trying to think why that was useful, but there was a reason for that. More usefully, you can copy plots from another assessment. So if you've done an assessment in the past and you want to reuse those plot locations for another assessment, there's a tool that says copy plots, and you select which one you want, and it says fine, I'll copy all those plots into this new assessment. So it gets a new job number, it's a new assessment, it just maintains those plot locations and plot numbers for that matter, if you want to compare between assessments potentially. And another minor tweak is in the assessment uploader in GeoMaster. If you're importing assessment data, typically you're going to be importing that from Excel or CSV. And the trouble was, if you had that CSV open because you're looking at it, then you wouldn't import it because the file was open. Oh, it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to import it, but I'll just give you the point. The point here is that if you have to configure all these columns, and it's nice to be able to see the file, and you can't do that if you've got Excel running. So we've got a previewer added in here that shows you the content of the file, and you can say, oh, here's the forest compartments and columns that I want to use, along with any fields I want to populate into my assessment. That's pretty much it for GeoMaster new features. So pretty minimal this year. In that respect, we've got a few in Harvest Manager. The profile tool is the main one. Has anyone had to go with the profile tool? A few of you. I'll pull it up so we can have a look. Now this is Harvest Manager, so it's not going to be in Pro this year. That'll be one of next year's projects. I'm just firing Arc map here. While ArcMap is thinking in the background, Harvest Area Designer supports domains. So if you've got domains that you want to use for setting status or road status or some of those features that have fixed lists of options. Previously, you could only define them in the pick list in GeoMaster, but in the Arc, they just used the raw numbers. Now you can actually have domains defined for those in Arc, in that ArcMap, and as long as the values aligned with the pick list in GeoMaster, then you could pick from the values in ArcMap and use those when assigning the status values, for example. Here we go. So this is just the profile tool I'm pulling up here. Let's pull our harvesting on board. Use Harvest Area Designer. And so we've added the profile tool here. Let's just zoom out a bit. So there's two ways you can use this. Well, multiple, but intention is one is you're putting in a haul line. So it's the harvest job and you want to look at the profile, so click, click. And so it instantly looks at the underlying DEM and says, well, this is what the lie of the land looks like. So if you click on the line, it'll say there's a slope of 26 degrees and between those 2 points, 200 meters with a vertical lift of 93 meters. So I just had a request from a harvest planner this morning saying, could you add the tower height to that top of the hill so we can see actually how high that's going to be. So that was a reasonable request. So request, we'd see if we can add that in there. The other thing you can do is you can just move your cursor along the line and you'll see in the top right here, it's giving an approximate estimate of what the slope is as you go through here. It's pretty even on this selection, but other parts are obviously going to be much wilder than this. The other way you can use this is if you're planning to put a road in, because then you might say, well, I want to go from this road here. And make sure I've got the tool selected. Which I have. I want to go join the road there and maybe even carry on up the hill. And then it'll follow that whole trail. So you can get a reasonable idea of whether that road's feasible on the terrain or the line that you've chosen. Obviously, it's pretty rough choice by me. If you've got hill shade enabled, it makes it much easier to see the lie of the land while you're doing this. Now you can save this, which will save it as a JPEG file, but it'll also save it in the GIS if you want, if you have a layer defined for that. And so now if we're an ArcMap, I can click on that line or I can find it. And it's not going to show on that screen. Isn't that creative? Never mind. It's life. Oh, it's because I got it this thing here. Okay. And or yeah, it's another attempt. So that's using an HTML link, and it's linked that image with the road. So you can see the planned road and you can see the profile for it as when you designed it. So harvest area ID, the idea is basically the forest, the setting name and the date. So those are the new features that we've added to Harvest Manager and GeoMaster as well during the year. And at this point, we open up to any other questions that might occur to you. Oh, lots of hands. Jeff.
In GeoMaster Background, the assessment name of the populated in the assessment table. The assessment table is populated.
Right.
We'd like to join it to make it easy to say job number.
So you got the stratum name out of Assessment Planner, and you'd like to be able to record that in GeoMaster as an attribute of the assessment? Yeah.
You've got the place.
That's right. It's being used for other things at the moment, but I don't think that would be a clash. So in general, would people be interested in having that strata name recorded as one of the assessments of the attribute of an attributes of an assessment? A useful thing? Seemed like a good idea, Jeff. Yep. Well, we have a field. Currently, the field is used for holding the yield table name. When you link an assessment to a yield table, it has the yield table name. But if you're doing assessment planner, you won't be linked to a yield table. Therefore, there won't be any overlap. So there's no reason why we couldn't also use it in your case with the strata name. So I reckon it's a reasonable suggestion. I'll just write that down here. Cool. There are other questions. Sarah. The profile tool, yeah, works off a TIFF, a DEM TIFF.
Zealand base maps in the New Zealand elevation service, which is like real when all the regional LiDAR. Like,
Yep.
so, you know, anyone at home has their own LiDAR, but the owners with the smaller part, they can, you know, use regional LiDAR, they can just get the profile of that.
So the question is whether we can run the profile tool off a feature service when we're running with ArcGIS Online. My gut feeling is it's probably fine. I will leave it to Connor to sort out how, because that's going to be his problem next year. But I think that's a perfectly reasonable request. I don't see why that shouldn't work, as long as we've got access to those elevation values. So it's working up effectively a raster, or as say a TIFF, which you'll have as a feature service. Yep, no, good question. And I think the answer is yes. Right, another one, Stu.
Yeah, will there be the option to use an existing line feature with the profile tool? So rather than drawing in your plan road, just use one of your road?
That's a good question. At the moment, there isn't, but you're not the first person to ask that question, which is already encouraging, because if more people want it, then it's more likely to happen. So the intention is you click on an existing line feature and it'll draw the profile for that. Yep, no, good idea. I don't see why we can't do that. So I'll add that to the list as well. Trouble with existing line features is sometimes they don't start and finish where you want them to. A road just goes on forever. So you've got some limitations you have to work with, but nevertheless, conceptually, we could do that. Cool. Any other questions? Kath, do we have any online? All quiet at the moment? Cool. Had some questions from Matt from Aratu, talking about carbon accounting areas and wanting quarterly carbon harvest tracking. So basically overlaying the cutover with CAAs to see how much was being cut per quarter basis, which I imagine is a reporting requirement. Anyone else got an interest in tracking at that CAA level of harvest? Not being a problem, might be a problem. Oh, well, there was an idea we'll raise that we can see what would be involved in that. I just thought I'd raise it and see what interest there would be. Another question was identifying areas that are liable to be considered deforested. So if you haven't done anything about it in 4 years, then you get stung with a bill, I think, for deforestation. Again, ETS question. Is that something else that others are grappling with? I mean, it shouldn't be a hard thing to sort out if it's got cut over or has been sitting in land bank for 4 years. We could run a report and say find them all. But obviously that's an operational need for those ETS accountants. And that's about it for the questions that I've had submitted before the meeting as well. So I think there's no more else. I think, yeah, have you spoken to, well, you spoke about that mobile, don't you, Luke, in terms of providing a new mobile manager. Is there anything else you want to speak to?
Yep. Right. I haven't done anything to GeoMaster Mobile for iOS, so nothing happening there. Google has made a change that we need to support at least not the latest version, but the previous version of one version of the latest Android release. So I think we're up to Android 13. I have to support Android 12, or they will not make that available to Android 12 or 13 on the Play Store. So I have started on upgrading GeoMaster Mobile to the latest Android. And one of the implications of moving that to Android 13 is it's now sandboxed. You cannot get to the file system in the same way that you could with earlier Android versions. And so files need to be when you get the upgrade, which will be somewhere in the new year, and I'll send an email out on this well in advance, is that where GeoMaster Mobile looks for its files now will not be the same as the new version. So you're going to have to redeploy your files to another location on your Android devices. Another change was that the spatial note type I've had to change because I could not get a 64-bit Android spatialite library. So I am changing it to just SQLite, which is the same one used by the iOS version. So a bit of commonality there. The importer for GeoMaster Mobile will get changed to support this new format. So that you'll need to upgrade your GeoMaster Mobile Manager at the time. This will be happening in the new year. So just be aware that we've been forced to change things, which complicates things for people, but sorry about that. But yeah, otherwise it'll look and work the same as the old version.
Thank you, Luke. I think we've covered most of this. Last chance for a word. But this is pretty much the end of the session. Hopefully useful day. I certainly enjoyed this morning, and Maliki, thank you for opening our eyes to things that could be and inspiring us to use Google to find out how to do that, because we'll probably forget by the time we get back to the office. But nevertheless, a really helpful session, and I hope you've found this useful this afternoon in terms of where we're going with GeoMaster, and certainly within the pro world and the online world. So big steps, but we're pretty happy with the way things have gone in the last year, and I'm looking forward to getting Harvest Manager on board next year. So with that, I thank you all. Wish you a safe trip home, and we'll be in touch online between now and the next meeting. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good.